Hey everyone, it's Natalie Bencivenga, and welcome back to Facts Over Fear, the censorship edition. Luckily, at least here on Substack so far, we're not being censored too badly. Hopefully that will continue. I wanted to talk today because I think censorship is getting worse. What about you? I'm noticing it with my own work, and so is my colleague and friend and co-host today, Nick Valencia. My TikTok recently, Nick, has been flagged twice in the last, I would say, week and a half.
That's crazy.
I know, one over a silly little post I made about Trump having to hide in a catering cart. That got flagged immediately and never got restored. And then the second one is under review. And I was talking about the ICE electroshock gloves that they want to implement now in our communities and in our schools. And so this morning, you guys, I was online and I was looking for topics for Nick and I to talk about. And then I see Nick posts a video talking about how he got censored as well. So we're going to discuss that. And then we're going to move into what this means for journalists in a larger context. We're seeing journalists being kidnapped and detained by ICE simply for recording the truth of what they see. And then we're going to wrap it up to talk more about our children and what Nick is witnessing and documenting in his own work as it relates to ICE. So
I'm trying to get people hyped up here. I'm not texting or anything
no,
like that. I'm
you're
trying to get
good.
people to come in. And if you're already in the chat, hey, it goes without saying, hi, by the way. Hey,
We're
everybody.
so
Share,
here for it.
like,
Yes.
subscribe, all the things. Push this out, amplify it. It takes a little while for the audience to show up. You know, the longer that we're on, the more people. But
Yes.
we got 30 minutes. We got a time here. We're trying to thread the needle. So share this, share the live here. That's all I've got to say. Thank you and welcome everybody here.
No,
That's what I'm
I
doing right now.
appreciate it. I appreciate it. And the truth is, Nick's better at promoting than I am when it comes to this. Like, I push stuff out, but I love that Nick's always like, you guys, you got to share our stuff. And I agree. So
Nice.
we're gonna start with something I think that a lot of people may dismiss as just an annoyance on social media, which is getting your content flagged, restricted, or taken down. But when that content is involving journalism and matters of public interest and isn't necessarily flattering to the powers that be, it's raising a lot bigger questions about who controls the information that we're seeing. So, like I said earlier, I have been experiencing it myself, and my colleague and journalist, independent journalist Nick Valencia, is also experiencing. So let's dig a little bit into this. Nick, talk a little bit about the most recent video of yours that has been flagged, and how did that just feel?
It reinforced what I thought was sort of speculated and what I had heard as, far back as November of 2025 when I
Mm-hmm.
was at the Pew Research Center New Media Summit. Aaron Parnas, shout out to Aaron Parnas, who was sort of, the early adopter of this platform. He mentioned the word throttled, and I didn't know what that meant. And then they went on, and other creators were like, yeah, I've already noticed it. And we think there was already suspicion that the Ellison family would absorb TikTok. And the expectation was that it was going to start to throttle creators, that maybe it wasn't going to happen right away, but that it would allow creators to think that nothing was happening. And then, boom. And that's exactly what happened. And so for me, I had, look, every platform that we can be on, I think is valuable to
Yeah.
amplifying our content, right? That's the
Yeah.
message. As journalists, both Natalie and I want to have our journalism seen by as many people as possible, right?
Mhm.
We believe the mission here is to educate and to inform.
Yeah.
We can't do that if the algorithm, which is our publisher effectively, is just basically saying, no, this content doesn't go anywhere. We're not going to show it to anybody at all. Or in this case, flag it outright as saying it's against their community guidelines. You would think that maybe I'm just making a big deal about it. I'm being sour about it or whatever. The fact is, this very clip went viral on Facebook.
Yes.
No problem there, right? It went viral on Instagram, no problem there. I put it on Blue Sky, on Threads. There was absolutely no problem. These are platforms that end up being some of our bigger audiences. Why then is my question. I still don't know what it was. I talked about the Memphis Safe Task Force. This is the unit that's a federal task force that we've done a lot of reporting on that effectively replaced the Scorpion unit. It's got Border Patrol elements. Do you know, looking back on your content and what you posted, do you know what it was specifically? Like, I know you mentioned the broad stroke themes, but do you know what you
Sure.
said specifically that you think got you flagged, Natalie?
Well, I do think it's interesting because they're flagging content for abusive language. That was one of the reasons. But when I looked at what I wrote, I gently poked fun at the fact that he had to escape on a cart, like in a catering cart. I I wasn't
Good for
calling
them.
him names. Yeah, I wasn't calling him names. I wasn't even commenting on his physicality, nothing. I literally was just like drinking a coffee, like this is the pick-me-up I needed. Like, and it was just a literal headline from a national news outlet. So to me, it's the supreme leader. Anything that makes him feel less than flattered is going to start now, I think, being seriously flagged. But the second video,
Like the closer that we get to the midterms, you think, or is it
oh,
just, yeah,
100%,
yeah.
Nick. It,
I
it
think that's the
doesn't
timing.
surprise me that I've had 2 videos flagged in a week and a half. Same type of content I've been posting on TikTok. And the second one was about those shock gloves that I find in particular very egregious. And then I look and see that your
You're inhumane.
content, they are inhumane. Then your content gets flagged around ICE. And to me, it's the words ICE, Trump, GOP. Like there are certain words that I'm noticing. I even did a test where I changed the title of my cover caption because one of my videos got flagged. I changed the title. It didn't get flagged the second time because I made the caption vague.
And
Isn't
that's
that
the insight
interesting?
here. That's putting you guys on game who are watching it. And hey, welcome everybody. Thank you, Adam, by the way, for shouting us both out. Adam
Yes.
writes. Mary and Cynthia, Nat H. I mean, I love Natalie Hernandez. She's like always just the biggest supporter. Thank you. And Deanne Miller. What I find really, really interesting about this all is it's just like, okay, maybe it's not that big of a deal. They're whining or crying, or it's just these leftists saying that they're woke and this is them getting even. People do make money off of
Mm-hmm.
views. We don't
Yeah.
on Instagram. We do here through paid subscriptions as part of how we eat, how we sustain our families. When our content is deliberately being flagged for no reason, that's a First Amendment violation. That's
Mm-hmm.
when you start to get these morsels of truth that one can suspect that because this is a company, TikTok, that's owned
Yep.
by a family that's sympathetic to President Trump, that they're not going to put out content like yours and mine that's factual.
Mm-hmm.
You may have, ribbed the president a little bit, and they didn't like that. But like, why is it going viral on one platform or okay on one
I
platform and
know.
not another?
Well, and
That's the
here's
thing.
here's the other thing. If we're going to keep to that rule of
Yeah,
you can't embarrass the president, then we need to extend that to all presidents because they seem to talk a lot of nonsense around Biden, who, by the way, hasn't been president for a long time now.
I know.
And
We're going
all of
after Hunter now
that,
too.
yeah, all of that is totally acceptable. So this is very much clearly slanted one way and it's in their direction to favor them. And I think it's also important to note, to your point, because people don't really understand free speech or what that actually means in context. A private company, if we were to look at this from that perspective, no one has like the right to censor us in a public forum. But I have to
They
wonder,
shouldn't.
they shouldn't, but I have to wonder the way in which this deal was structured is concerning because it's a mix of entities. And I was trying today after this, Nick, you really inspired me because I'm like, well, what did happen with the TikTok deal? The deals, the information is completely non-existent. You can't really find out much more than just it was bought by MGX, Oracle, and Starlake or Starlike. I can't think of
Yeah.
the name.
But
Yeah,
Elon Musk element or
yeah.
Starlink? Yeah.
I think it's Starlink, but don't quote me on that. I have to look it up. But point being, it's like 3 entities. And it got me thinking like, well, why hasn't this deal been publicly disclosed? It's a stock, right? Isn't TikTok a publicly traded company? Like there's just a lot of questions here that I think need to be raised. And also, and I hear you, I don't get paid to post on TikTok. I don't have nearly the following, but I am a citizen of this country and I'm a journalist and I have
Yeah.
every right to share my opinion. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm not degrading anyone. I've had videos aimed at me that were violent and degrading, which I find interesting because then I've tried to get those flagged and it comes back. This didn't impact our guidelines. And I'm like,
This does not go
cool.
against our community standards
Right.
for some
That's
reason.
fine, right?
Yeah.
So it's all very interesting, and I thought it was really important to bring up because the news cycle is moving so quickly. A lot of things are getting lost, but I am worried because of the fire hose of information that you and I are trying to sift through, like every other journalist
Yeah.
in this country right now. Things are getting lost and taking a back seat. And when we look at how bad things are, it's easy to look at this and be like, well, it's not so bad. But it is, because if we can't get out information around what you like what you're covering around the atrocities of ICE, this is a slippery slope for me. What else are they going to silence pretty soon?
Yeah, today it's me, tomorrow it's you. And today
Yeah,
it's this platform TikTok, and tomorrow maybe it's Meta, or maybe it's a whole content strike. And
yeah.
how then are we putting our content out, right? I mean, that's the fear. I testified on Capitol Hill earlier this year about press freedom and lobbied for press
Mm,
freedom. And I spent the time talking to some representatives, especially those in the Silicon Valley, and lobbied them about this, how I don't have a publisher. We don't have publishers as
yeah,
independent journalists technically, right? We don't have a boss
right.
to our own boss, but the algorithm is. And this is putting you
Mm,
guys on game, to go back to the earlier thought. It is certain words. It's not like an actual person that says, "Oh,
yep,
I'm going to put Natalie's content out and not put Nick's content out."
right.
It is keywords, it's trending audio, it's the way you say something, it's the way you cut something, it's all the matter of the first 3 seconds. And all of that, which we have sort of started to learn a little bit as we've been in this space, it goes out the window if they're just not going to let it shoot into the atmosphere or ether at all, you know? So, yeah, I mean, that's my fear of it all. It's
Yeah.
TikTok today, but tomorrow it could be Substack. Who knows?
Exactly. And right now I'm glad at least we're here on this platform,
Me
because
too.
we have access to those emails. So if TikTok goes dark tomorrow, if they decide to, shut down Instagram and we lose all of those followers, we still have all of these emails. And I think that's a really important
Yeah.
distinction between a platform like Substack and Instagram. And look, Substack has its issues too that we can get into another time, but at least we have access to our audience in a more substantial way. And you
You don't
know,
have to rely on the algorithm. You can go directly
exactly.
to your audience, and this is great for that. I really appreciate that for sure.
Absolutely. And next I want to talk about something that takes this to a whole other level. I just
Mhm.
saw this story from The Intercept today, and I was like, "Oh, I'm so glad Nick and I are connecting today, because this is something I really want to talk to you about." Journalist Ricardo Parias has spent nearly 300 days in an ICE
Crazy.
detention center in California after being shot in his elbow by federal immigrant agents while covering ICE activity. He was there documenting, much like you do, much like I've done in the past. His case raises profound questions about press freedom, immigration enforcement, and what protections journalists actually have when they're documenting these actions. Now, this is a very disturbing story, you guys. He has also talked about how he has seen floating worms in their water supply at this detention center. Not only the words poor medical care don't actually describe what's going on. His wound is still actively festering, and his elbow is like a purple black, which I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV, but when your tissue starts to degrade, it becomes like a black color. So my concern is the where maybe he got injured, he's not received adequate care, and therefore the tissue is basically dying. So he could end up in
So gross.
serious trouble. And they have been trying to pin him as a undocumented person as being their reason. But as far as I was able to read and research, and from what The Intercept has said, they haven't been able to prove that he's undocumented. I just want to say this, Nick, before I get your thoughts. I don't care what someone's paperwork status is. No one around the world, but in particular here in the United States where we live and we pay taxes, should anyone, I don't care what they've done or haven't done, should be dealing with inadequate medical care, no drinkable water, and a space in basically a concentration camp level of duress. And I am embarrassed and horrified at who we are. That once again, this is going right by us. And what are we willing to do about it?
Yeah, we have to step up. We have to see these people as human beings and not as
Yeah,
undocumented immigrants first, or as here illegally. I think what we need to realize and what needs to land with people is that you have several people from states away from each other that are telling the same story of a lack of basic medical care, of at best it being delayed and at worst it being denied. There
Hmm.
is a Hippocratic oath that medical providers, healthcare providers in this country take to do no harm. And it's almost as though in these facilities, which supporters say are needed, and the critics call them concentration camps, and there's more and more evidence that they are. But it's almost by design, Natalie, that
I
these
know.
facilities exist for cruelty. Like it's people want to voluntarily deport, but they can't because why? Somebody makes a buck. You have
Yeah.
this other element now of inhumane gloves. You find out this Kentucky
Mhm.
company has some support, not so silent support for President Trump. It is out loud. And we've heard this phrase of saying the quiet part out loud. And now they're just doing the things that we see previously as unlawful under any other administration. And they're daring you to do it.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, they're daring you to catch them and make them do different. That's
Yes.
what's really troubling in all of this. The last thing I'll say is I think it was Andrew Jackson who
Mm.
basically said, The courts have made their decision, now let them enforce it." As if to say, Trump is kind of taking a page from somebody who he admires and respects historically. The
Mhm.
courts make their decisions. I don't care. I'm going to launch my private ICE army out there and expand these private prisons where people are being denied healthcare access at the basic level. And then I'm going to go take this and spread this hate out on the streets of America with shot gloves, censoring journalists like you and me
Mm.
who people rely on. We're just saying the things that are said privately in newsrooms that
That's right.
journalists in mainstream can't say publicly or feel like they can't. That's the
That's
only
right.
thing that we're doing. And if that's taken away and all of these other things are taken away, what are we left with? That's the scary
I
part.
no, and I mean, this
Oof,
is one
and
of
rant.
those no, this is one of those episodes where I just feel like we're raising a lot of questions that if we don't collectively as a society answer them, they're going to be answered for us. And that's what's concerning to me. And I'm looking at some of the comments like Empress
Yeah.
Musings, bringing up the Constitution and due process. The due process thing, once again, why aren't they enforcing that, right? None of these people in these detention facilities have had due process, right? And
Because there's no accountability or there's no
there's
regulation over them. They get away
exactly.
with whatever they want. It goes back to the point. Dare me to stop.
Exactly. And that's what got me thinking when you said that. And then when I saw this comment, I started thinking about how O'Bannon recently was talking again about running a third term. And then on Trump's social, they're showing him, 2029, like we're going to win or, and this weird stuff, this really
And we're supposed
weird.
to laugh at it or not pay attention or not get
And,
riled up about it, right?
and
We're
it
supposed to
makes
not get riled up because it's just a joke.
that part. And we know it's not a joke. We know it's not a joke, Nick. They're going to do whatever they can to stay in power. And I think the concern that I have is that we're not concerned enough. And I don't even blame people on an individualistic level because the price of food is so high. People aren't affording to live. We're dealing with all of this constant news cycle from hell. People can't put gas in their car to get to work. And so you want people to engage with what's happening on a national level, but they can't even just get through the day. And so
No,
that
and they
is
can't
the
even agree if
point.
even if they're on their left, right? Like we split this country down
Yep.
effectively. It's two-party system. Some progressive locals can win races. We've seen third-party candidates, but then we split it, and then you have among that two sides these
Hmm.
fissures that get created. You see it happening on the right with this white nationalist movement where they blame Jewish people.
Yep.
Then you see it on the left, this kind of horseshoe theory as well, which we talked about last week. And
Hmm.
so that's the fear. We know that conservatives are really good at getting in line and following the leader for the most part, even though I just talked about this sort of some people will paint it as a civil war. Let's not be so dramatic, right? But like
Hmm.
they vote. Old
Yeah.
white people vote and they vote conservative and there's single issue voters who vote on abortion. And even though they voted on the economy, they're now seeing that this president, who was allegedly this great businessman, is actually tanking our
Yeah.
economy and he's getting certain people richer. And it's a powerful thing. Natalie and I go after powerful people. It's
Hmm.
that's what it is. It's the party. We saw a powerful person end up wrapped up in a House ethics investigation today, who's a Democrat, Representative Jimmy Gomez of the 34th Congressional District, my hometown in the
Hmm.
Northeast. This is not something that any of us shy away from, or should we? It is a
No.
battle against the elites in this country who are more than willing to use the levers that have already been pulled by the current president and his allies.
Amen to that. And I think that's such an important distinction with a lot of independent work. You
Yeah.
don't have to play these partisan games because you don't have, owners of a certain class running the show. And I think that's very important and impactful in how we can move and pivot and do this work. As we wrap up here in the next few minutes, I wanted to talk to you
Already? I
about.
mean, we've got a lot of time here, I feel like, but I know it's like, oh shit, it's 4:53.
I know.
My kids get home very soon, and
I
that's what we're
know,
up
that's I'm
against. We're
always
against this
trying to get
time
you,
crunch.
like, out the door before the kiddos come in the door. But I just
And be
wanted to
sure to
get.
like, share, and subscribe. Share this if you're in the chat. Thank you guys so much. I mean, always, Natalie Hernandez is so reliable. Adam Wrights has become very active in this. The hearts, if you guys tap the hearts, all that stuff. I know it's so silly. I've learned
It
this from Don Lemon. It all really matters.
I
It
know.
it tells this machine if you hit that heart and love this stuff, right? Like I'm doing right here. It like amplifies our reporting. So
No, and
yes, please share
that's
this
so
chat before we
appreciated.
end up ending
Yes.
the show.
Okay, so last thing we're going to talk about, I want to just zoom out from one individual case to just kind of looking at this enormity on a scale of immigration
Sure.
detention. I just read today that Brookings, the research organization, estimates that 400,000 people have been booked into ICE detention from interior arrests since the administration began.
Mm,
There's about 65,000 still in these camps,
okay.
but 400,000 people have been processed. That is staggering to me. And this number, of course, doesn't just tell us the story, it just tells us a very small piece of it. Because what I start to think of is the amount of ripple effect that has around all
Uh,
of the people and our communities. When we're looking at that number, Nick, and then we see that the detention capacity is likely to expand with another 45 billion that had already been allocated under the one big beautiful bill, there are many children that are being detained and impacted. Detained being the key word. I don't think people understand there are babies in these camps. Can you talk a
and
little bit
so
about what you've discovered around some of the children's stories and the families that are being impacted? Because as a father, and I'm a stepmother. It just this takes it to like a whole other level of horrifying for me.
and we heard it when we were younger journalists. Like, "Hey,
Yes,
right, I got this trauma streak
thank you.
happening here in my hair. You
Oh,
don't
I don't
have
want
any
to talk
gray.
about
I got
them.
the trauma." But
Okay.
we heard it that, we are gonna see some tragedy, and we're gonna go through things and
Mhm.
see some things that are really gonna be pretty difficult, and that once we had kids, or I was told this, that once I had kids, stories involving children were really gonna impact me. I remember during Family Separation 1.0, when it was a matter of federal policy for these families to be separated because they made everyone crossing a felon. And, there's discretion. Families still get separated now, but this was a matter of policy. Everyone got it, right? And I
Yeah.
remember seeing this little girl who at the time, I was a young father. Ellis was probably a year old or 8 months old or something like that. And I saw this little girl, and I won't ever get her face out of my head. They at that
Mm.
time had brought in the social workers to try to be more comforting because kids were literally being comforted by other kids who were teenagers in there. And I saw all this stuff, and it was really heavy to deal with. This, if we don't emphasize it enough, is a different type of family separation, even if it isn't a matter of official policy, because they're going after heads of households and they're separating the family that way. You go after the heads of a household and the rest is dismantled. And you do that as a matter of cruelty to send a message. That's
Mhm.
Stephen Miller's tactic. And seeing this as a father, you as a stepmother, it hurts. I see a lot of the stories that are put out by Lydia Terrazas from the Dilley Immigration
Mhm.
Detention Center. Shout out Miss Rachel, who has
Yep.
become a friend, through
Mhm.
Lydia and through my reporting doing
Mhm.
this stuff, because it takes unlikely allies who thought that this child TV star would end up being somebody who helps amplify my work. But
Yeah.
because she cares about the most vulnerable, and I think that when we say we care about the most vulnerable, that starts with children. And it
Yeah.
doesn't just end when they're in utero or whatever, like some people only care about them. Oh, let's, whatever. I don't want to get sidetracked. You have to care about children.
Yeah.
They are literally the most innocent and the most vulnerable. And for me as a father, I think that helps lead my reporting and lead my coverage and really inform, I think, the way I go into handling people's worst days.
Mm.
Because we have to talk to a lot of people who have gone through their worst day. And I've gotten into the habit. This is the last thing I'll say. I've gotten into the habit with my own family. You know, I've got a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. I get on my knee to get on the level with them. I have also learned that like a hug really goes a long way, you
It
know?
sure does. It sure
And
does. Just that
yeah,
human connection to the
yeah,
people that love you and that you love. And I saw that a lot as a social worker in my previous life, just being in those spaces and being somebody to listen. You don't have to fix everything. And I think that's why these conversations are important. We need to be amplifying and we need to be organizing because, as horrific as all of this is, there's a lot of people out there who are famous and who are not famous doing this
yeah, the
kind of
ordinary and
work.
the extraordinary.
That's
And
right, and
sometimes
it's
ordinary people become extraordinary.
that's
We're
right.
ordinary people meeting the moment because there's a
Yes.
moment to meet, right? And I think
S
when we look back, your stepdaughter, that's your child, you know, like my children, they are going to be so proud of what we're doing because look at, we had a whole 30-minute conversation about what people aren't talking about right
that's
there,
right.
which is
That's right.
censorship of people like us. And what did that Pew Research study just recently tell us about how more and more people are relying to get their
That's right.
news on people
Yeah,
like you and
and
me?
there's a reason.
And
There's
there's
a
a
reason.
reason. There's a
And
reason for all of that, guys.
and
Thank
I
you, Cynthia.
appreciate you as always, everyone. There were so many incredible comments. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but just know that you are seen and valued. Nick, I know you got to run. So until next time,
They're pulling
everyone,
up
take
right here.
care of yourselves and
Yeah,
each
the last
other.
thing I'll say, like, share, subscribe. How
Yeah.
can you help amplify our stuff? We're out here on the front lines to say the things like again I said, not anything that we're doing is so revolutionary, but it is because we're just saying the private part publicly. The same things that we talk about on these shows, on these independent platforms, are conversations that are had in newsrooms that both Natalie and I have been in. We
Mhm.
come with a Society of Professional Journalism standard of ethics and we apply it to this ecosystem that desperately needs it. The fact is, though, if we're being rigorously honest, this is our business. As my young child knocks on the door, this is how we support the country, and you can support us and keep us out there and keep us in the space. Thank you to everyone watching on replay. Watch, share, subscribe. Natalie, hasta la próxima. Okay,
Bye,
we'll talk to you later.
everybody. Bye, Nick.